So hello everyone. One of the post-lunch sessions. I hope we will be able to keep you entertained and energetic. Um, thank you so much, first of all, for being here, for joining us today. And thank you for taking your time to listen to us as we share our experiences from India. One of the core things that some of you must have figured out by now, that Water Leap Coalition Community and Ocean in a Drop, the presentation that was made by Ashraf yesterday, all of them are interlinked. And in a way, they tell a story of how youth work has evolved for some of us back home in India. Some of the work that we have, that Ocean in a Drop, which was anchored by Prava, an organization, actually led the foundations of how do we begin to create our interactions with young people of the society. What does youth leadership actually mean for us? And as youth workers, what are some of the challenges that we face, and how do we build an ecosystem of shared understanding, shared vocabulary, shared experiences and learning? And it's from that space that we heard Kanika today in the morning when she introduced Commutiny. It was almost like the most organic, logical next step as we were working with youth work as to how do we create collectives across the country that can come together to act strategically from a space of creating youth leadership in India. And when we say youth leadership in India, we mean to say not just in terms of youth development and youth engagement, but looking at young people as architects, craftsmen, craftswomen who are actually setting the agenda, talking about what is it that they would like to engage in, what is it that they are passionate about, and what kind of society that they would like to build for themselves and for others. Now, in this context, in 2018, when the conversations were beginning to happen and the Commutiny experience actually pointed us to the benefits and the value of creating something like a networked existence of youth organizations in the country. So Commutiny actually initiated state chapters across India, bringing together, today we stand at about 100, so more than 100 organizations together, and looking at how do we have shared strategies of creating impact. And from the Commutiny experience, we recognize that if we are really talking about setting agendas here by young people, then we cannot stop at being active engagement, having active engagements in the social sector space with the civil society organizations and nonprofits. So many of us were still talking about how do we create and work with youth workers who are located within the civil society space. And at this point in time, we realize that if we have to change the narrative, then we are talking about engaging governments, corporations. We're talking about engaging loosely networked organizations and movements that exist all across the country and bringing them together in a structure that allows for the agility, that allows for response, that allows for multiple identities to exist. And that's the context of birth of Water Leap Coalition back in 2019. We are a very nascent coalition. I'm one of the members of the coalition. All of us have a primary job somewhere else. And it's something, the energy of the space is what brings us together in the coalition. Today, I'll be talking about what are some of the collectivization strategies and principles that has really worked for us. So it's almost like a reflection of 170 organizations who have been trying to define youth work in India. And what do we feel works? Why do we feel that there's a coalition needed? And how is this coalition different from other network structures that we often see across the globe? So in the morning, we talked about the youth-centric lens. And if you can click a few more times, then you'll be able to see. And so Kanika introduced, how there is a worldview that exists around different modes of engaging young people. But essentially, we are talking about a youth-centric lens. And when we speak of youth-centric lens, we talked about in the morning how there is a linkage between the self and the society. We would be very keen to hear that what is it that comes to your mind when you hear the word youth-centric lens in your context, in your work, in your countries. Maybe we can do a quick pop, and anybody who would like to share what comes to your mind when you hear the word youth-centric lens to a nurturing youth leadership. What does it mean for you?
Trying to look at the world through the eyes of the young person and their lived experience. Mm-hmm. Trying to understand empathically, because you're not living it, but trying to appreciate and empathize how they see the world and experience the world around them.
Beautiful.
Asking the young people and letting them tell you what their world looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I think managing the other end of that pragmatism, asking young people, but also managing expectations.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Yes.
Like looking at probably challenges and opportunity that lies, for the future of the youth, with diverse, ideas, objectives in life, and seeking for a direction to become better.
Beautiful. And these were some of the insights that, we actually echoed in the organizations that we were working with, right? One thing that stood out for all of us, and which is also true in some of the experiences that you're talking about, is while, we were all trying to connect with young people, empathically trying to understand what is it that their experiences in the world is today. And we were all very keen to create the space for them to take leadership, set agendas. But when it came to actually setting the agendas, the spaces for young people to be on decision-making tables were often extremely limited. So they would be consulted. But in terms of actual decision-making, we felt even in the organizations that we all worked with, there was very limited experience of young people being on the boards, young people being in leadership positions, actually setting agendas within nonprofits. And that was a reality check for many of us. It gets worse when we start talking about governments and corporations, right? And so while we all had good intentions, the setting of the agenda was more of a consultative process rather than actually exploring some of these relationships and taking calls. And so one of the key mandates of Vartalip Coalition, when we say as a vision of the coalition, is to how do we enable some of these spaces that actually nurture this kind of leadership and this kind of an ecosystem. So it's not just about equipping the young people with the right skills, the right orientation, the right perspectives, the opportunities, but also is the ecosystem ready for it? And hence, in terms of looking at bridging the self and the society continuum, what was important for us is to enable Jagrik spaces in the ecosystem. And for those of us, Jagrik is nowhere in the Hindi dictionary. It's I would say it's a word that was invented by Commutiny and Vartalip Coalition. It's actually a mix of two words in Hindi: Jagruk, which is being aware, sensitive, sensitized, conscious, and Nagrik, which is a citizen. And so it's talking about a person who is extremely aware of their surroundings, of their environment, and has the will and the opportunity to act and shape their own environment. So creating Jagrik spaces and being a Jagrik was actually one of the key mandates that the coalition took on as one of the visions of what is it that we would like to do. And so, one of the, we often do this at Watalib as to whenever we have to figure out what does youth work mean, what does youth leadership mean, what does Jagrik mean, we come together as members of organizations and we get on a retreat. And these are our spaces of explorations, figuring out, brainstorming, setting the agenda, and exploring common aspirations. And some of the questions that we asked during one of these retreats, which were the initial retreats that formed the coalition, was, where is the agency of young people? Are we truly nurturing the agency of young people? Do we feel that young people have the space for co-leading? Are we talking about skill building, or are we talking about enabling their full potential? And we don't know what that full potential will look like because it's up to them. So you enable a space and create opportunities for them to explore who they are, what they want to be, what is the kind of society that they would like to build for themselves. And in doing so, prep the ecosystem for shared power, for shared purpose. And while we were exploring some of these questions, what stood out for us was most of these spaces of transformation and change lied in the relationships that young people create with their surroundings, with others, the relationships that organizations create with young people, and the relationships that institutions create with each other. So essentially, we are talking about how do we bend or transform these relationships of young people with other generations of leaders and create a truly equitable space of representation and participation. There's a short film that we have, and this actually brings together voices from some of the core members. Kanika is on that, who have talked about what is Watalib Coalition for us.
Few technical difficulties.
It's just the internet keeps chucking us out.
So to give you a snapshot, we are talking about over 254 institutions and organizations who are now in the ecosystem of Vata Leap Coalition. And when I say ecosystem, that's because, say, for example, organizations like Commutiny, they bring 100 organizations with them into the fold of Vata Leap. So by virtue of Commutiny being a member, they have expanded the narrative to 100 other organizations that they liaison and work with. There are 164 members who are registered with us, like Commutiny, like Farm to Food Organization. You heard Deep Jyoti, who was talking about his experience of becoming a youth leader and then later becoming a youth worker. So many organizations like those are part of the coalition. And if you just look to the left of the slide, we're talking about not just civil society organizations, youth groups, and youth coalitions or organizations which are networks, but we are talking about UN and government agencies, academic institutions, corporates, media organizations, donors and funders, and individual members from institutions who are part of the coalition. So the effort is really to make it a space which is diverse, can hold multiple stakeholders together, and then talk about what youth work should be. And that's what Ashraf meant in the video when she talked about that every single person who is in a position of power, in a position of being able to influence the ecosystem, and they have to become people who are nurturing youth leadership. And that's what the coalition intends to reach out to. If we look at the range of issues that the organizations are currently working with, these are all issues that impact young people today. And what's interesting is that before many of the organizations joined the coalition, while they were working on, say, for example, issues of gender and domestic violence, but the narrative of young people was missing from that work. And so they talked about it almost like a general category of people that they're working with, either women or men, but the young people's narrative within the category of women, or young people's narrative within the LGBTQI community was missing from the work of these organizations. So what has happened over the last 3 years, that many organizations who did not have youth work as their focus are now looking at building in agendas of young people within their programmatic and organizational strategies. We spread across 20 states of the country. The dots give you an idea of what is the coverage of the coalition today. Moving on to the nuts and bolts that we were talking about, and how do we structure ourselves? What is our experience of collectivizing in the country? And if we move to the next slide, please. One of the first questions that we asked was, all of us were very familiar with how to design organizations. Some of us were also familiar with how to design networks, but very few of us were or had the inkling or the idea of how do you design coalitions, which are loosely structured bodies with multiple leaders, multiple organizations behaving as seeds of the movement and setting the context, the principles and the values of work, and then coming together. And one of the important, amazing analogies that, Kanika and I were talking about today morning was if you look at an apple and an orange, what's the difference? The apple would usually have a central core and there's the meat around, right? But an orange, every single piece of orange has seeds within it. And they are individual identities, yet they come together and create the fruit. And essentially, we are talking about an organizational structure like the orange. And how do you facilitate that in a world which is too used to a centralized way of functioning and then having networks all around? And so, we are talking about moving from individual organizations who were doing scattered youth work in the country to, building networks. And this is what has been experimented in the country, either the hub and the spoke model or multi-hub and self-organizing models. And these are things that have been done in India in the past. But here we are talking about an organic network, which is almost similar to what exists in nature and organisms, where you have multiple intelligences which become active based on the need to respond, based on emerging visions of change. And so in this kind of a structure, there are benefits and there are challenges. For example, we don't know when people ask, what is the kind of impact that you're trying to create? And our immediate answer is that we don't know, right? We have a vision, every person a Jagrik and every space a Jagrik space. But, we don't have numbers that, so many organizations, so many young people, so many forums. Those are all our mechanisms. But what is the impact? Are we talking about a democracy which is functioning well? Maybe. Are we talking about a certain way that economies behave? Maybe, right? Because we don't exactly know what those metrics are. They will show to us as we engage over a period of time. And so it's a structure that focuses on being in a certain way. It creates a space for everyone to be and become.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm intrigued by this. I think it's really interesting. And yeah, I like the fact that it's organic. I really like that idea because I think it's more meaningful than hierarchical, top-down kind of value process. What I'm quite intrigued by, though, is that you've got this kind of quite a diverse range of organisations within the ecosystem. How do you, I say ensure, that sounds like a monitoring, but how do you kind of get that buy-in for that youth-centric lens, commitment to fifth space? How do you kind of get that commitment from that organism, if you like, of interconnected organisations? How do you sort of get to that point, I guess, with them?
Yep, we'll come to that.
Okay.
Very, very soon. If we can move to the next slide. And so just to give you a sense of what we are talking about here. So we see ourselves as a constellation, which is constantly moving and evolving. You know, there are roles that have been identified within the coalition, and members on their own volition take on certain roles within the coalition, depending on their interest, their availability, their context, and their aspirations in the current moment. So if you look at it, we are essentially talking about 5 different kinds of roles, from being the core group of the Internal Governance Committee and board members, to being ambassadors and narrative champions of the coalition. And as a member today, I'm part of, a Varta Lab. I'm part of, a group of advisors and allies. But at the same time, tomorrow, maybe 6 months from now, I have a lot of time available on myself, or my organizational agenda allows me to become a pilot, adapter, and an adopter. And so within the coalition, I have that liberty to move between roles and contribute to the work of the coalition, given where I am at. And so one of the key things that we talk about, so one of the key things that we talk about when we are talking about experiences of being in the coalition and contributing to the work of the coalition is all of us may have, our own agendas and interest of why we are coming to the coalition and why do we want to be part of it. And those last for a while, right? Till my interest is entertained, or till I continue to have that momentum to contribute. But as human beings, we are used to having moments of high momentum and moments of low engagement. And in these spaces, then, we talk about the only way, thank you so much, the only way to maintain that interest, to keep the coalition living, is to recognize that people will forget what they did as part of the coalition. People will forget what are the events that they were part of, but they will never forget how they felt in those moments. They will never forget the kind of relationships that they built while they were doing some of the stuff. And so if we have to have one parameter to assess what is the health of the coalition today, we are talking about what we call the feelometer. Right? How do members feel in the present moment is what dictates what is the kind of building relationships, what is the kind of engagement that we have been able to accomplish across different actors, no matter what agencies that they belong to. So quickly, do we have time?
Briefly.
Do we want to do the exercise?
We can, I think everyone's connected, so we can go ahead.
Okay.
Can I add one thing to that point?
Yes.
Sorry, just, also answers a little bit of your question, which is what makes someone who's not really thinking about youth-centric development in their everyday missions, why would they come here? I think also for them, the ability to be able to carry their missions in. So everyone's passionate about and attached to their own missions. And the whole idea of the coalition is that while youth-centric remains key, everything else is, everything else is at some sort of intersection of the other. So if I'm a gender activist, I see value in being here because I can bring that agenda in and I can make that part of someone else's agenda, just as climate change might become mine. But in all of that, what we're looking at is how are young people at the center. So I think that's also part of what is inspiring and exciting, is my ability to influence and shape the agenda of the coalition, just as it shapes me.
So we have a quick 1.5 minute video.
In general, social work is very complex and it's a difficult place to be. And so people find themselves alone and lonely and, really battling the odds, very challenged. And a little bit of love goes a long way in that space.
The experience of creating a loving space, I think, encourages all of us when we go back to our organizations, our states, our districts, our villages, our cities. It allows us to create new spaces and, create collectives of that nature there. So I think it creates a ripple effect.
The role of the youth collective is critical because what it's trying to do is bring together all the organizations working with a diverse profile of young people and trying to build an understanding that young people are not just human resource in an economic terms. They need to be invested in, given an equal state and given a supportive structure so that they can be these independent, disruptive, wholesome leaders.
In general.
So getting to the bottom of it, what are the key principles that we follow when it comes to collectivizing and creating these spaces of engagement? The need for such principles emerged because, with a coalition that huge, we wanted certain common blueprints, certain common markers that would unite us as we explore our own context and our own needs in terms of building local collectives in our respective areas of operations. Bringing in the regional context, bringing in the diversity, and also at the same time creating a cohesion in terms of what are we accomplishing. These principles, we call them flowing principles. Hanika, when she's making her presentation, she will talk about how the flowing principles came alive in one of the experiments which were conducted with Vata Leap members. Right? So we'll get to more details on that. But essentially, the flowing principles allow us to be a certain way, to see youth work in a certain light, and to do youth work in a certain fashion. One of the important things that is a reflection for the coalition is that a lot of investment today goes into the doing. And so we are constantly moving from one project, one program to the other, constantly moving from one event to the other. But there is very little investment in the being and the seeing. So when we speak of building resilience, when we speak of building power of the youth work, then we are actually talking about this collective, which is being and becoming in a certain way that activates itself in times of need. And in one of the panels which are going on parallelly, Ashraf is presenting the experience of one of our campaigns where during COVID, which became active because there was a coalition that existed in a certain way, and we could do things when it was needed. We could respond when it was needed. So a lot more investment on being is what is needed today. A few examples of what have we done so far. So a few things that the coalition has really been involved in. One of the key things that we've been doing is identifying youth rights and duties. And while a lot of us in terms of youth work had talked about rights of the youth, but recognizing that rights and duties go hand in hand when it comes to doing youth work and working with the youth was an important milestone for the coalition, and wording them into 3 key youth rights and duties, which almost form the backbone of a lot of work that we do with young people. And this is something that we've talked about already. The first one being around the right to decision-making spaces, being part of them, but the duty to take on leadership and make decisions when you are needed, and they go hand in hand. The second one looks at taking leadership in terms of the processes that we do, and at the same time, building a certain fraternity within the coalition, and also inspiring harmony, which means in a diverse culture, how do we create spaces for us to bring together multiple ideologies, multiple perspectives, and the right to be part of enabling spaces that allows for such harmony to exist, that allows for self-discovery and self-realization through action. The third right and duty being, the right to sustainable livelihoods. So while a lot of our work with youth has been around building their agency, but it also means creating a certain kind of a sustenance for the youth, which is in line with some of the values that we are talking about. So sustainable livelihoods emerged as one of the big agendas that youth do have a right to, but at the same time, they have the duty to engage with social change in a certain way, so that they're able to bridge that continuum between the self and the society. So these are choices that the young people make. We can move on. A few examples of different kinds of Vata labs and working groups that exist in the coalitions. As Kanika was mentioning, these Vata labs and working groups are spaces which are initiated by members, depending on when do they see that there is a need for creating something. So say, for example, bonding and learning working group and narrative shifts have almost created the backbone of what the coalition is today, looking at member engagement and also setting a certain narrative of youth work for the coalition. However, lately we have Vata labs, which are our labs for doing experiments, innovative pilots, has come up with ideas around creating Pulse, the Nature Lab, which looks at climate change, a lab around livelihood and entrepreneurship, lab around active citizenship. And so, next slide. And one of those experiments, which was a pilot in the Vata lab, was Gender Jagrik that Kanika was mentioning about. And this is something which has now become a full-fledged campaign that was taken up by many members of the coalition. It was also funded by one of the sponsors. And you will see that, the engagement of young people while maintaining a certain blueprint of principles has continued through the work of Vata Labs, and then Gender Jagrik becoming a full-fledged campaign and a movement and a shared project, which was executed by members of Vata Leap Coalition. Another similar project is around the togetherness table. This is one of the most agile and innovative experiments which was incubated within Vata Leap Coalition. And it talks about how when young people in intergenerational spaces get the opportunity to experience and express the 5 feelings that Ashraf was talking about, then what are the kind of narratives, dialogues, and experiences that emerge in those spaces, and how such experiences, such dialogues can actually shift traditional spaces to Jagrik spaces. So it's about having those difficult conversations, having the conversations around well-being of young people. Yeah, this is my second last slide. So lessons from the collective, on the reflections from the collective. We have talked about how the coalition is a very different animal to a typical organization. And so constantly we are in space of negotiating paradoxes. Some of these paradoxes which we have been challenged by, and we continue to explore ways of addressing them as we continue to become and change ourselves as youth workers, have been the paradox of structure and ambiguity. To have something which is so agile, we cannot have structures which are limiting. And so everyone who comes into the space, there has to be a comfort level that they develop over a period of time with the ambiguity of the vision, ambiguity of the goals, ambiguity of what we are trying to do, yet remain committed to the kind of values and principles that we are talking about. And so the nature of those relationship and the engagement that Kanika was sharing and we talked about in terms of the philometer becomes the strong glue that keeps the collective together. Hand and heart is another one where we are talking about, the heart lies in the space of passion and our commitment to doing certain kind of work, while the mind tells you that you are engaged only when you're doing things. And so how do we see engagement of members into the being space? One quick example of it in terms of a metric was that we were trying to ascertain in the early years as to what do we mean by an active member? And so the first metrics that we came up with, number of meetings that they have attended, number of events that they have been part of, number of experiments that they have done. And later on we realized that, it's none of that. Because a member can be very, very active, but suddenly, they can lose that momentum, while someone who's been completely dormant comes up and takes the lead. So active membership is nothing to do with your attendance or your participation in different forums, but what kind of relationship that you have maintained with the coalition. And that becomes an important marker. Other paradoxes that we are struggling with are the fact that, in organizations, there are very clear territory. This is my space and this is what I do. However, in a coalition, almost everything is a no man's land. And so we are constantly negotiating boundaries. The benefit of that is that for organizations, it's an opportunity to go beyond their organizational boundaries. So they're not limited by their funding resources. They're not limited by their structures. They are able to do much more because they're part of a coalition. At the same time, it's a challenge because there is somebody else into your space. And so, it's also negotiating that space of territory. And lastly, which goes with building diversity, is this whole battle with inclusion and efficiency, which is a classic tale of any initiative which is trying to create participation. Which means that in a space like this, where for most of the members, it's a second engagement. And so for a second engagement to become successful, there is a certain level of efficiency that's needed. But as coalition, you can't demand that because it's voluntary. And so how do we create accountability is by knowing what's happening with each member. So the central facilitariat actually keeps an understanding of what are members going through. And so today, if I'm going through difficult circumstances, they know that my secondary responsibility will take a backseat. And so they wouldn't push so much of an agenda on my table. Be empathetic, be compassionate, be loving, and take the load and call in others to share some of that load, right? So what that requires is that if there are 164 members, then the facilitariat has to have the tab or be in touch with all of them to an extent that you know exactly what's going on in their lives. And that requires deep subjective relationships that the facilitariat builds with network members. And lastly, I would like to talk about one piece which has been critical to building the coalition, is this piece around shared power. And in many of the coalition spaces, we talk about, central secretariats or the facilitariat, which is facilitating the space. They have to take charge. because they have to get things done, right? But there are spaces that they need to enable so that members can take lead, which means that it's a lesson in being able to let go, be okay with somebody else stepping in and doing the work and soaking in the experience that they bring with themselves. And that has been a huge learning experience for the coalition over a period of time. To enumerate, in the first year of our existence, most of the Varta labs were anchored by members in the central facilitariat team. But today, if we look at the Varta labs, most of them are actually anchored and led by member organizations, wherein the facilitariat is only responding to what they say as the needs are to keep the Varta lab running. And so that's a very visible shift in the way we have learned to manage relationships and spaces within the coalition. I'll stop here. So,
thank you, Dr. Pandey. Awesome. It's so happy to hear about this youth-centric approach to social development and how we can all become self-awakened, more self-aware, active citizens who are contributing to our development. It's really great to hear. We have a second presentation, but just before we head into that, I'd like to provide you all with an opportunity to ask your questions, any concerns you have to get them assuaged, any inquiries you have, now's the time to share with those with us. I know we have Dr. Pandey here as the tech team sets up the next presentation. I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions on the floor that we could take care of. Please.
Thanks for that.
And if you would introduce yourself so we know where you're from
Hi,
as well.
my name is
Great.
Emma. I'm a trustee for NYA. Thanks for that amazing presentation. I just wanted to, so you mentioned just near the end, just talking about how you look at your members as active members and like their participation and how you don't measure it in the traditional metrics. So how do you actually measure that in terms of for your reporting, for example, or how you share your information with other organizations? Yeah, how do you guys measure that? What metrics do you use if you use any?
So there are two ways that we track the engagement of members with us. One of them is that, almost every year we come together in a physical gathering that brings together the members. And that's when we actually do a full-on survey with them as to what have they enjoyed in the network, in the coalition, what is it that they would like to contribute to, will they like to shift their roles? And so that's an opportunity for us to see who's responding, who's not responding, where is everyone at. The second thing, which is an ongoing process that goes on throughout the year, is there is a working group called the Bonding and Learning Working Group. And the Bonding and Learning Working Group has a single point agenda, which is to keep members engaged. And so there are moments of high activity through the campaigns. But in the moments where we don't have campaigns and when the coalition is almost resting and figuring out what next, the Bonding and Learning Group actually looks at various other ways of creating spaces of interaction for members and helping them build new relationships. And they range from formal learning events wherein organizations bring their learnings to the forum in the form of whatever work they have been doing, with open sharing. And that's the safe space that has been built over the years now. To informal gatherings like date nights, right? Where members come together on something we call them Cinder Nights. And Cinder Nights are basically members coming together on one platform, and then you're paired with somebody and you learn about that person. What's the reality of that person? And you're almost on a date for 20 minutes when you're talking about each other's life circumstances. And so we really believe in building those relationships. So those are small events that keep happening. And thirdly, each member is tagged with another person in the Bonding and Learning Group. And as they see that the activity or engagement of a certain member has gone down over a period of time, they pick up the phone and give a call. Is everything all right with you? Can we be of any help? And so there's constant relationship building where you are made to feel that you're valued and cared for as a member. And that's what keeps helps us keep a tab on who's active, who's not active, where are they, what are their struggles.
Okay, I think we'll stop it right there for now because we have a second presentation. So Dr. Pandey would have shared with us how to become a Jagric, that self-aware, that self-awakened citizen who is so concerned about his or her environment that they want to do something and change it and to actively contribute to its development. Now we're going to learn a little bit more about how Jagrics can contribute to affecting social change through constitutional literacy. This is the part where you all go, ooh, ah. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that particular process, and to invite that conversation to the core of the discussion we're having today, I'm going to call upon Pooja and Kanika. I believe Pooja is online. So I should mention that we do have some visitors in cyberspace. So I'm not sure if the tech team, if we could solicit some questions from our virtual attendees, that would be great. But certainly Pooja and Kanika, the floor is yours. I see Pooja is here. Pooja, can you hear us? Pooja?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, loud and clear. Thank you so much. Awesome. All right, ladies, the floor is yours. If you could do the presentation in around 20 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
We are probably disappeared of the deck seems to have disappeared.
Okay. Just a few technical difficulties. Perhaps in the interim, if anybody has one final question for Dr. Pandey.
Trustee of the NYA. Sorry.
Okay.
Trustees. How you talked about this a bit, but I imagine lots of your donors and some of the partners listed are looking very much for their issue or evidence for their issue. How do you square that kind of freedom of a network to young people to go in the direction they want to, with the need for funders, UN agencies? I'm thinking particularly are very good at kind of officers coming and going, well, we really need this and we need it yesterday. How do you square that?
So I think kudos to the facilitarian for managing some of those relationships and timelines. But essentially, there are two learnings that we've had so far. There are funders who invest in very time-bound specific projects with very strong metrics of what is it that they would like to track. Say, for example, the Gender Jagrik campaign was one of those projects. And so for those, when we are executing, then there are common design principles which are created, shared timelines created across member organizations. And the facilitariat makes sure that one is able to deliver in a certain way, right? However, with such donors, we've also had engagements wherein one is trying to educate the donor community itself as to why there is a need that it's good to fund projects like this, but why there is a need to support the ecosystem of the coalition as much as finding these small projects. Because what happens is then the coalition keeps moving from one project to another, and it becomes a project delivery mechanism rather than a living being coalition. And so, in the recent past, and Kanika would be able to enlighten us a little more on some of these conversations, but, acknowledging that this is a struggle, there has been a lot of effort to get the donor community onto the coalition so that they are able to experience what we are experiencing. So very often now, we don't go to donors asking for money. We ask them to come and be part of some of the spaces that we are holding and experience it. And the moment they start experiencing it, then they get a hang of what we are talking about and why there's value in investing in the being and the seeing as much as the doing. And that's where then we are able to create some leg room. But I agree, it's a constant struggle and a lot of effort. And Kanika is at the helm of it, actually.
Awesome. Thank you, Sir Trustee, for your question. Are we ready? Okay, we're still setting up a little bit of the technological aspects, but I'm not sure if perhaps Pooja or Kanika, if you have any preparatory remarks you'd want to say before we start sharing.
Pooja, do you want to maybe just start anyway?
Yeah, I think we can start. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, Pooja, please go ahead.
Okay, ठीक है. Thank you so much for setting this up. I think it's really a great privilege to be presenting this case study with my colleagues Kanika and Aruna there. So just getting into it, I think as Ashraf, Kanika and Aruna have been talking about the community Vartalip ecosystem and the work that we do create a lot of youth-centric interventions, tools, and frameworks that any organization or institution working with young people can use and adopt it in their work to strengthen youth development. And today we want to talk about one of those interventions that also helps to build constitutional literacy among young people. So just getting into a bit of the Indian context, and if we can move on to the next slide, please. Like with India being one of the youngest countries in the world, we have more than 595 million people who are less than 35 years old. And any social change that takes place will impact the future of this huge population. And that is why it becomes absolutely necessary that the youth take ownership for affecting any social change. And for that to happen, they need to be nurtured in a way that they not only bring about social change, but also be the change. Because young people are the building blocks of any society, and what they think, what they feel, how they interpret, how they analyze, whether they respond or react, and how they do that, all of this shapes the future course of any society, of the country, of the world. So then I think the big question is then how do we create a platform where they can be nurtured to make the right choices, do the right things, and support and lead the right change. And as practitioners who have been working in the youth-centric development for over 3 decades, our experience has been that to really unleash the potential of young people, we must not teach them leadership. We must co-create with them what we call fifth spaces. And yesterday with Ashraf's presentation and today morning also, you've been hearing a lot about fifth space. So I think I'll just skip over that. And if we can move on to the next slide. So yeah, the next one.
Just animate.
So we believe that fifth space experiences are very key to inspiring young people to take leadership and ownership of self and social transformation towards building a strong and resilient nation. And the foundation for nation building lies in our constitution. The constitution is the common story that binds us as citizens of the country. It outlines the responsibilities of the government, it lists the rights and duties of the citizens, and it gives us the responsibility of building our communities on the fundamental values of liberty, equality, justice, and fraternity. In 2016, when we surveyed about 20,000 respondents across India, we found that on an average score, constitutional literacy was as low as 34%. And it is in creating real world experiences of the fundamental values, rights, and duties that we have found a core element of our work with young people. So Samvidhan Live via Jagrek is a product of these learnings. It is a board game on constitutional literacy. Over a period of 5 weeks, young people play this game in pairs and they meet up together as a cohort week after week to share their learnings and reflections with each other. Every week, each pair rolls the dice, they pick up a card, and from the options, they choose a real life social or self action task to do within their homes and communities. And these tasks are specifically designed to expose them to the constitutional rights and duties in their daily lives. And the more tasks they complete collaboratively, the more points they can score. So at this point, I would like to take a pause and show a short film that has from one of the iterations of the game when it was played across India in 2017. So if we can please pull up that video.
हमारा देश कौन चलाता है? आप में से किसको इसका आंसर पता है? हिम्मत, सैटेलाइट।
Dear Mr. President, growing up, whenever anyone asked me, what do you want to be? I used to say, President of India. It always drew a laugh, but I was dead serious. Then in school, my teacher told me I would have to be the holder of the Constitution if I became President of India. And so, she urged me to study my civics lessons attentively. But sir, they were so boring, I gave up on my dream very soon.
My learning journey started with an innovative game. A game with the young, for the young, and by the young. It was a thin line between a reality check and a reality show. Our goal was to become Jagruk Nagriks. We like to call ourselves Jagriks.
टास्क करना शुरू किया तो बहुत ज़्यादा मज़ा आई और टास्क के दौरान हम लोगों ने ऐसा नहीं फील किया कि बोरिंग या हम लोग कोई पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं ऐसा कुछ, क्योंकि जब भी हम लोग को कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में बताया जाता है तो हम लोग कहते हैं यार क्या बता रहे हैं, बस करो प्लीज, बंद कर दो.
So संविधान लाइव, I'll better explain it, to live the constitution. हमेशा हम संविधान को एक तरीके से एक डिस्टेंस बुक की तरह ट्रीट करते हैं, but it's actually decide how our lives should be, and it gives a kind of ownership to us. कि we should own it, we should live it. That is what we are working on.
क्यों जाने संविधान? क्या करना है संविधान?
We worked in pairs, and every week the Jagrik pair would roll a dice and, depending on what came up, pick a rights or duty card. On the cards were reflection and action tasks. Each had a social and self component.
Organize a friendly sports match, cricket, football, kho-kho, in the community with diverse participation from all religions.
We would choose the one we felt confident of doing that week and go out on the streets to accomplish it.
सेल्फ टास्क था जिसमें कि जेंडर, अपोजिट जेंडर का रोल प्ले करना था, तो उसमें मैंने अपने मामा का रोल प्ले किया था और मैंने रोटी बनाई थी. बाकी लोग जो बोलते हैं कि हाउस वाइफ लोग कुछ नहीं करती है, मतलब किसी को ऐसा बोलने का हक तो नहीं है, लेकिन अगर आप किसी को बोल रहे हो तो आप एक दिन उस हाउस वाइफ का रोल लेकर के देखो.
हमारा ये बहुत खूबसूरत तालाब था जिसे हम लोगों ने लगभग बर्बाद कर दिया, और हमारी कोशिश है कि इस तालाब को हम लोग ठीक कर पाएं.
तो ये भी आज हमने फंड रेज किया. 25 दिसंबर क्रिसमस वाले दिन हम सेलिब्रेट कर रहे हैं कुछ अंडर प्रिविलेज बच्चों के साथ.
और कल रात मैंने यहीं पे सोया है और बहुत बुरी कंडीशंस है यहाँ की, बहुत टेरिफाइंग कंडीशंस है. रात में नींद भी नहीं आई क्योंकि अंधेरा बहुत था.
मेरी हेल्प कर सकते हो कि मेरे पास खाने के लिए सिर्फ 1 रुपए नहीं है, सिर्फ 3 रुपए है, तो आप मुझे खाने खिला सकते हैं.
Have you inspired your friends to go out and vote?
We also tried to see how we, as citizens, were living the Constitution by carrying out an interesting survey in different parts of the country.
Our research found that the record of the citizens of India was abysmal. Just like me, not many had the interest and inclination to learn about the Constitution, let alone live it. Even among those who knew the Constitution, the focus was mainly on rights, and hardly anybody understood the duties they needed to perform as a citizen. Far from being anti-national, we don't know what it is to be national.
It tells you that you either know nothing or you have half knowledge, and half knowledge, as all of us know, is worse than knowing nothing.
जब अपन ग्राउंड में उतरो तब समझ में आता है कि एक्चुअल इस देश की रियलिटी क्या है. तो मेरा ये बहुत बड़ी सीख थी जो मैंने जाना.
और हमें राइट मिलना तो हमें ड्यूटी भी करना पड़ेगा, दोनों बैलेंस में करना पड़ेगा. ये तो लोगों को अवेयर नहीं है. वो जागृत में आने के बाद मैं खुद को भी वो समझ गए और मेरे फ्रेंड्स को भी मैंने अवेयरनेस दिया है इसके बारे में.
So, Mr. President, my humble request to you is to find innovative ways for the citizenry to learn about the Constitution, to get it out of the courts and into the streets of India. We need constitutional literacy at a war footing if we seriously aspire to achieve the values of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity enshrined in the preamble.
Finally, sir, I would like to tell you that my dream of becoming the President of India has been rekindled again, thanks to the Samvidhan Live Jagrik project.
But when I did this task, I really got very happy because it gave you a sense of contentment that actually you did something for someone.
Sorry, I just got the film stopped in the middle because we'll run out of time. I think basically, sorry Pooja, without your permission, we did that. It's just a couple more minutes, but I think the idea really was to try and bring a tool that we've used. So this is a co-creation of a large number of organizations who brought in their expertise together, and it's actually been iterated over many years now, and comes in a really nice looking box. Couldn't carry it with me, but it would be nice to be able to show here. But I want to just come to the principles. And so then this becomes a bedrock of all the work that we do, and all the work that we design. And Aruna talked about flowing as principles that we use to facilitate the coalition, but also in the design work that we do with young people. and just what they mean in the context of, for instance, this game. So our first principle, which is feelings need to be honored. We have to recognize that ultimately how people are feeling needs to be valued and placed in the room. And the game is designed to create a lot of room for choice, for decisions that young people will make, for dialogues where they talk and listen to each other, where Jagriks are allowed to, basically spaces are created for them to share without any judgment, without any objection. We're on slide 6 is where we need to be on. The second principle is the L, which is leading together with adults. And that's sort of how the entire game is facilitated. So there is a mentor who's a part of it, someone who facilitates not just the weekly engagements when young people come together and they roll a dice and they pick a card, but also through the week. So they meet week after week for 5 weeks and they pick up task cards. Like you saw, they went out on the streets doing these different things. But this mentor is not just working with them that once a week, but is also in touch with them throughout, sometimes going with them to do the tasks. So there is this whole leading together that's happening with adults. And that's very key for a young person to feel confident, but also feel that there is the space for them to do what they need to and to make mistakes. Ownership of self and society. Over the weeks that this game is played, we've created 2 sets of task cards that every week you need to take. One is self and one is social. So the task that you get is, so this was inspired a little bit by Gandhi and the whole idea of my experiments with the truth. So trying to do, practice what you preach. So you will, if it's right to equality, you may go out there and try and experience it through a task that you do in the community, but you will also experiment with it with yourself. And that helps you examine your own beliefs, your own behavior, and sort of, that internal self to social society transformation begins like that. Willingness to take risk. This is something that young people are very good at, much better than most of us. But it's important for them. It is having something that's a little challenging, that can, seem a little daunting, but exciting is important. But it also helps them. So it's not just to be done for the excitement, but also helps them stretch their own boundaries and get a little uncomfortable and do things differently. And so that's an important element of the designing that we do, when they're going out and doing tasks. Some of them can seem quite challenging. Inclusion. So we make sure in all of our designs and in this game as well, that as far as possible, we make some sort of cross-border interactions and engagements happen. So young people are paired up. They don't do these tasks alone. And typically they're paired with people who they may not know very well. And we try that every cohort is quite diverse. And so you become friends with someone who you probably would not have, naturally been drawn to. And so that's also quite an important component of the design. Now is as important as the future, which is, for young people, so much pressure is on them about doing what they need to for, positive outcomes in the future. And while that's important, it's also important to recognize that for young people, what they're experiencing right now in the moment is very, very, very key. And that's why gaming as a pedagogy has come in for us. And so we've used that quite a bit, just using gaming as a pedagogy in most of our designing, because that builds excitement. That creates a pull dynamic for why I want to be here right now, today, why I'm going to give up some other kind of leisure time to come to this community space today. There's got to be a pull dynamic. There's got to be an N. Grounded in reflection, which is our last principle, is that there is, for any kind of learning to actually seep into the head, the heart, hands, and the feet, it's got to be grounded in action and reflection. And so there is that cycle built into it. The weekly get-togethers that happen are spaces of reflection, sharing, dialogue. And then between those, there's a lot of action, but there's also some reflection. So this is sort of just wanted to exemplify through this game how the flowing principles come alive. We'll just very quickly The game itself has, these the sort of these principles which is unique to this game. The principles on the left top are quite similar to flowing. Some of the things that we have inside the game is, building knowledge and capacities around specific issues and themes, creating fifth spaces because every time they meet together is a space. It's exciting and interesting for a varied range of young people because within the game there are degrees of difficulty. So the task cards that these young people pick up every card has a gold, silver, or bronze level. And so you can decide that week if you want to get 20 points for gold or if you settle for 10 for silver or 5 for bronze based on how you're feeling, what the task says. You have a big test coming up next week. Whatever your reality is, you can make these choices. So there's chance based on rolling the dice and getting a certain number, but there's also choice. So you're applying your own critical skills and you're making decisions for yourself based on aspirations as well as reality. And so that, all of those components help create, build agency and leadership for young people. And the rest is just the content of the game. In this case, we just focused on the Constitution of India. We'll do the next slide, please. These are just iterations of the game. It's been produced in 9 different languages in the country. We have a version on SDGs. It's been adapted in Nepal. A friend of ours picked it up and adapted it in Armenia. We don't know what's happening yet there with it, but it has quite a universality to it. It's on the Indian Constitution, so it can be run outside of India, but it can be adapted in other contexts. It's also gone digital. And these are just some impact numbers. I'm not going to get into them. I think it'd be nice if we get some time to talk. Just some things that young Jagriks did. So this is, as I was saying in my plenary session, this is that just Jagrik. This is that window into self and social transformation. So just you get a task, something you never thought you'd be doing, and you do it, and that kind of inspires you to do more. The leadership sort of continuum that I had mentioned again in the morning, just the pedagogical part, let me focus on. When you see the bottom, we say it's adult. So the Just Jagriks are adult, curated, and youth-led social action. The Jabardast Jagrik, the next level, which is co-designed and co-led by young people and their mentors. And then the Jeevan Jagriks, which is youth-led, youth-designed, youth-curated enterprises sometimes, initiatives sometimes. And we've seen young people travel through that continuum and then create more and more spaces for others. Yeah, I think that's us. Sorry, I had to rush.
Thank you so much. And so our distinguished participants and our esteemed presenters, unfortunately, we have now come to the end of our final session on youth work and advocacy. I want to express my deepest appreciation to Dr. Pandey, of course, to Kanika, and to Pooja, who has been so faithful to remain with us online. Thank you all so much. And certainly through our discussions, we've explored that power of youth work in advocacy and focusing, of course, on the Jagrik example in India. We've delved into the strategy, the successes, the challenges, some of the manifestations of how the Jagrik movement actually moves and operates within the system. And I think these initiatives highlighted by our presenters have demonstrated the potential of youth work to creating meaningful impact, both within India and certainly beyond that sovereignty as well. And I also want to thank you all. This was the final session and you chose to spend it here with us. And for that, we are really, really grateful. And we hope that you received from this session what you needed to hear. And so I just want to encourage you to carry the spirit of youth work with you, to continue to advocate for young people, advocate on their behalf, and for is the phrase that we use at the Youth Council. And just want to thank you all for your participation, your enthusiasm, your cooperation with me. And we're working together to build a Commonwealth that celebrates and empowers our young people, and that will lead us towards a more sustainable, peaceful, and common future. So thank you all. Thank you. Next up, we do have the plenary session. So I think we have, I'm trying to confirm if we have a small break, but we'll just make our way that direction. I'm sure they'll direct us accordingly. Thank you all so much. Yes. And thanks to my rapporteur, Samson. Thank you for coming.